Welcome to the show. From Peterson's, I'm Taylor Sienkiewicz, and you're listening to You Have a Cool Job, a podcast highlighting those who took their profession in a unique direction and what they did to get there. On today's episode of You Have a Cool Job, we talk with Rod Hoffmann. If you've ever wondered who designs toys like Mickey Mouse, Barbie dolls, and Legos, it's somebody like Rod. Rod is a toy designer and owner of Big Eye Studio. Well, Rod, first, do you want to just explain for people that are unfamiliar with the toy design industry, because it is so small, like you said? I get the sense that a lot of people think of toy design as like Santa's workshop. So how would you describe what it's like to work in that world?
Well, it is a little like Santa's workshop. It's fun, except really what we do as toy designers, as opposed to, say, a toy inventor. There's a slight difference, and I think it needs to be discussed. And an inventor really just kind of comes up with an idea, and their premise is to generally go off and sell that idea to a toy company that will then pay them a royalty, and they sort of walk away from it.
Rod is essentially the next step after this initial invention and turns these ideas into something real.
What we do as toy designers, mostly, that work comes to us from, could be a toy startup company, could be a toy company itself, and they will give us the parameters of the project, and then we actually literally design the product, and we are industrial designers, so we typically will do the outlook design, is what we call it, which is basically how it looks and how it's going to perform. So, if we were designing a toy car, for example, if this is on paper, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to roll. It's going to have this turn, that turn, the doors open, so on and so on. Then the next level that we tend to focus in on is how to make it happen. And that becomes a little bit of a mix of design and engineering. And we typically shy away from the actual physical engineering, but as a toy designer, we get heavily involved in it and direct it. So we're hands-on. Next step, as I will do, and most of the other independents do as well, is we also follow the product all the way through to production, which means that we will typically work with the mold makers. We will typically work with the toy manufacturers, most of them being in China, and we work with them to make sure that our idea and the things that our customer has approved actually hit the shelf.
But Rod's job doesn't end at just the production. He also is involved in the marketing of the toy. We
will typically also design the package, design the artwork, design the logos for the brand sometimes. And it really comes down to what the customers want and how much they want to do and what they have available to them as resources. So that's really it in a nutshell. I like to say we take ideas and make them happen.
And then you own the Big Eye Studio, correct?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
So you're both a toy designer and a business owner. How do these two things coexist for you? And then just how do you run your business?
Yeah, it's a right brain, left brain sort of thing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's always been a challenge. I have been an independent designer for many, many years. And it is difficult. There's no two ways about it. Luckily for me, I've been in the business long enough that my name sort of, and my reputation precedes me, and therefore I don't have to be on the phone hunting clients every day. And I like to keep my business small. I have run large studios. I had a big studio in Atlanta. We eventually actually sold out and went to work for one of our clients. And then that company hit about $180 million, and I left there and went back out on my own. So Yeah, I've learned a lot, but business is part of what we do. I mean, even as a toy designer, you have to remember that, you can make it in your head and you can draw it on a piece of paper. But if it costs more to make than the consumer is willing to pay for it, then you've really shot yourself in the foot. And that's really where the rubber meets the road for us toy designers is designing products based on our long-term knowledge of what works, what doesn't, what costs what. Because if a person comes to me and says, I want to make a 12-inch articulated action figure, well, I know what it takes to make that because I've made plenty of them. And whereas a younger designer may not have the slightest idea what it's going to cost, and so they may go about it and design a action figure that's got all the bugs or all the buzzers and bells that they ever wanted in an action figure, and then it ends up actually costing 3 times what it should to manufacture, and then therefore the retail price is way higher. So it does revolve around business. We do need to understand the trends. We need to understand what consumers are willing to pay and what they're not willing to pay.
Right. One other thing that stuck out to me when I was looking into your company was that you have those huge companies that are willing to pay a lot potentially, like Disney and Marvel.
Yes.
So how did you first tap into those distribution markets, and then how is it to work with such large companies as a small company?
Well, I've worked with them in many ways and different points over the years. A lot of the items to which we do are literally licensed, which means that, be a good example, a few of the Disney items that I do show online, they were actually created for Fusion Toys, which is an American company, and what they do as a company is they obtain the license from Disney to manufacture toys under their name. But because I'm a Disney approved designer, therefore it allows me to cut to the chase, design the toy and the packaging based on Disney's prerequisites in their style guide and produce a toy that meets the Disney standards. And then therefore I just do the design, but we are in contact with Disney and their approval process and things like that all the time.
In addition to these well-known toy distributors, Rod also works with brands big and small all across the board.
I do it with many licensing companies, from Ford and Chevy, GM, to little companies you've never even heard of, all the way to National Finals rodeo people. So it's crazy. And that's one thing I think people misconstrue is that, for example, Disney does not make toys. Mm-hmm. Toy companies make toys and Disney allows them to. And that's probably the best way to explain it.
Rod mentioned a couple of misconceptions people have about the industry, so I wanted to know how this plays into his personal life. Rod, what are then, because you say people have a lot of different assumptions about it, when you tell friends or family or just people outside of your industry what you do, what are some common reactions that you get?
Well, the funniest reaction I usually get from people, is a little comical. People, I will say, well, I'm a toy designer. And they will plain-faced look at me and go, well, what kinds of toys? It always kind of, there's only 2 kind of toys that I know of, adult toys and children toys, and that's it. And then the second question they will ask, well, what have you ever done that I've seen? And, of course, you can see on my portfolio I've designed Disney and Marvel and action figures, and over the years I've done things for Taco Bell and the little things you get in your Happy Meals and things like that. And people will recognize those, and they think that's really cool.
Children's toys are a pretty common part of everyday life, but the toy design industry is fairly small. Rod explained why it's now shrinking.
And it is political. The tariffs involve some of it, but primarily the shift in retail purchasing and the buyers. A lot of items are being purchased online. A lot of the mass retail, which would be your Walmarts and Targets, they're shrinking too. There's only a handful of large retailers and a handful of large toy companies.
However, Rod is picking up on these changes in the industry and predicts the future of toy designing.
The trend right now, and it's primarily the bulk of my customers and who I focus on, are smaller companies. Some of these companies are being run out of people's basements, for example, but they're making more money than the larger clients that I have, because what the trend has been is what's called factory to or manufacturer to consumer. M2C is what they're coined this. And that means that instead of manufacturing a toy and then going through a distributor or a sales rep or even a retailer to get to the customer, they're now selling directly to the customer. You can witness this on Alibaba and Etsy and Amazon and eBay and in places like that. But one of the other big trends happens to be, Kickstarter and things like that. And so what happens is that's where the toy industry is headed.
These changing trends are what is putting large retailers like Toys R Us out of business. Rod shares what the new direction for himself and other toy designers may be going forward.
Well, it's very vibrant to me. That's been my mantra forever. We can go direct. Instead of the toy costing, this is typical, it's called keystoning. And let's say something costs $2 to manufacture. Well, then I sell it to a retailer, let's say Walmart. Walmart pays me $4, and then Walmart sells it for $8. Well, now the factories are saying, well, why should I sell it to Walmart, who's going to give me all these restraints and then probably not sell my product very well? Or I can sell directly online and charge the customer $4 or even $3 and still make as much money as I did before. And so that's really changing the industry dramatically. And that's what's driving Amazon. It's this ability to bypass the brick and mortar stores. And that is making the pool smaller, but at the same time, it's making people like me busier. I have a lot more clients that are a lot faster. We're going to market a lot faster than 2-year developments. And it's wonderful. I think it's one of the greatest things to hit this business. So it's shrinking, but I think as this grows, it's going to explode.
Right. And with that being said, then where do you see your company going?
I'm focusing on that. I am focusing completely. I've moved away from thinking Marvel and Disney, primarily because that's not really where my bread and butter is anymore. My bread and butter is with the smaller guy. I'm dealing directly with the owner. I'm dealing directly with the staff that starts it. It's vibrant. These are millennials doing this. It's exhilarating for someone at my age with as much knowledge as I have to have the same feeling I did when I was 20. And so that's where we're headed. We're headed directly to dealing with people who are wanting to develop a product, and I can show you how to manufacture it on the cheap and sell it. And you know as well as I do that shifting consumer market is immense.
Rod explains that this transition is actually a return to the industry's roots in some ways.
Now think, there used to be a time that a person sat in his little workshop and he made a bunch of toys by hand and he sold them locally and he was called the toy maker or something. Well, we're getting back to that. So now you have a person who sits in his house or in his little shop and they come up with ideas and they sell them globally and they can sell them in small quantities. It used to be you used to have to make 20, 30, 40,000 pieces on a first run. With 3D printing and some of the other technologies out there, we can create 10 or 100. And if you like them, you buy them, and then we go to mass production.
Rod said that his company is utilizing 3D printing more and more as well. Now for the question of, how do you become a toy designer? While Rod has many years of experience in the field, I wanted to know how he got into the industry in the first place.
Yeah, here's how I tell people. When I was a little kid, I was the one who took his toys apart. I wanted to know what was inside them, how did they work, and I also grew up north in an industrial world. So I was very familiar with manufacturing and how things happened. And so I went on to art school, and I worked in various industries along the way, and then I wanted to be in advertising. So I started out in the advertising industry in the early 80s when I graduated, and some of the biggest agencies on the planet. So that was where in Atlanta, and that's where I learned advertising. But I didn't really care for it too much. So I branched out and was starting to focus on brand identity and things like that. And I had a little studio, and we had customers like Coca-Cola and, Ciba Geigy and Georgia Pacific, the typical corporate graphic design studio stuff. Well, and it was fun. But then I'm a motorsports person. So I got involved in designing motorsports cars and packages for the graphics and so on for those same customers. Well, that got noticed, and I ran into a client that also became my boss eventually, but they were in the toy industry, and they primarily made trading cards. So I went on. There was about 6 people in the company. I tripled their staff, brought my people with them. We were a $180 million trading card company in board games. And some things happened. At the top, the CEO died, and the company kind of fell apart, and I left. And I went back out on my own and focused solely on toys. So I don't have the typical toy designer background. Mm-hmm. I come from a designer's background and a person who is self-taught in industrial design.
If you decide you want to go to school to be a toy designer, the most common degree to earn for this career is in industrial design. However, Rod's degree was in graphic design, and he made his way to toy designing later on. Rod shares his advice for aspiring designers.
That's really ultimately what I would focus on for new designers or anybody wanting to get into this business is be creative. That is the first thing that you have to be. And have fun.
As for final thoughts, Rod explained what being a toy designer means to him.
It's art to me, artists never stop creating, and I see it as art. It's an expression of love. It's an expression of empathy. It's pouring out something that somebody else can touch, see, and play with. That's how I see it. It is valuable. Kids love toys, adults love toys, and it gives people a chance to smile.
You may have always wondered who the craftsman behind your favorite toys was, and now you've met him and are maybe even inspired to dive into the field yourself. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.